Hello everyone, and welcome to our video demonstrations on culturally responsive educators, learner and context sensitive practices. I am Carroll, implementation coach and mentor to the teachers presenting in this video. The work of the elementary and middle school teachers in this video was made possible by a subaward from a U.S. Department of Education Teacher Quality Partnership grant that was awarded to Dr. Yi Huang at Coppin State University for the initiative titled Pathways to Professions, Preparing Culturally Responsive Educators for Inclusive Excellence. In the following clips, teachers who are working to become more culturally responsive will demonstrate different multicultural practices suggested by Geneva Gay. According to Gay, culturally responsive teaching begins with knowledge of student populations and knowing their cultures and experiences. I hope you will find the following demonstrations valuable.
My name is Kacie Robinson, and I teach 4th grade reading and writing at Glen Avenue School in Salisbury, Maryland. I have changed and grown both personally and professionally over my 15 years of teaching. I find that the easiest place in my school to build relationships is in what is called the reflection room. At other schools, this room might be called the in-school suspension room or the timeout room. I love going here. Often the students in there are angry, frustrated, crying, or yelling. Acts of kindness and compassion in this room receive the greatest response. I often go in there during my planning or my lunch to sit with a student who I probably already know by name because of the teacher chatter. I offer help with an assignment, or I give them a pencil or ask them what's up and just listen. I always try to leave the student with a strategy or a plan for the next time. If these students are 2nd or 3rd graders, I teach 4th grade, I make sure that I become one of their favorite people in our building. And then when they get to 4th grade, I can request to have them in my class so that they know they are going to have a great school year. When I think about how my classroom is different than maybe some other classrooms, I think about one student in particular. To protect him, I'm not going to use his real name, but for this speech, let's call him Luke. Luke would tell you that he feels like he is safe in Miss Robinson's room. Luke spent a lot of his school time sitting on the floor under his desk, ripping paper into tiny pieces, head down, not speaking, and appearing to be frustrated most of the time. Luke had experienced trauma in his life that even after my extensive time with him, I am yet to fully understand. During writer's workshop times, Luke would cover his pages with the word no, or draw small little figures, usually with knives or guns. I would sometimes just sit with him and whisper write his story for him. I would write about something we had done that day, such as eat breakfast, or I would write a story referring to the little figures he drew. I knew that Luke loved Legos and Minions, as well as his 2 little sisters, Liliana and the baby, who he lovingly nicknamed Ice Cream. So I would start a story with, I like getting home from school and seeing my little sister Ice Cream. She always... Or I would whisper write little speech bubbles by the characters he drew. Sometimes he would add on to what I wrote. Sometimes he would add on and then rip the page. Sometimes he would scribble everything out, but slowly, gradually, he began participating more during this time, even though he did not always follow the lesson or write on the topic and skill. He was writing and trying. I would literally acknowledge his efforts multiple times throughout the lesson in different ways. A pat on the back, a post-it note, a sticker, a jelly bean, a hug, an out loud, isn't it awesome that so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and Luke are working so hard today? Luke never wanted to be in the cafeteria because it was loud and less structured. Each day at lunchtime, I would look up and his silent face would be standing in my classroom doorway. I would nod and he would come and sit and eat with me. This happened every day of the school year. I wrote him a note one time so that he wouldn't get in trouble if asked where he was going, and he kept that same note with him for the entire school year. I am so fortunate because I get to watch my students, like Luke, experience 5th grade. I see their work in the halls and pass them on their way to specials. For some students, like Luke, my classroom became the place that everyone knew they could find him. When he would leave his classroom, when he would get upset, or when there was a substitute, he would find his way to my room, or be brought by the guidance counselor or a social worker who would whisper, "Can he just stay here for a few minutes? There's nowhere else he wants to be." Many of my colleagues and administrators might expect to find a recess list on the board of classroom. Well, in my classroom, no one ever owes recess. I mean, no recess time is really taken away from the students. This sounds crazy, right? When we get ready for recess, I often have students select the kiddos that they think have worked hard that day or done something kind that day to get lined up first or to get to go out first. The students are always honest. They don't usually try to line up their friends. They are genuine with their selections. The student who I may have considered putting on the recess list on the board, I called at the back of the line and we walked together out to the playground. And they walk a lap with me around the playground. We have a small track. This is a time when we discuss the behavior that needs to change and why it needs to change and how this will help them and other students in the future and possibly move to the front of the recess line. And we come up with a plan moving forward. After we finish the lap, maybe we need to keep talking, or maybe we feel like we've reached a solution. I had this amazing student named Lamont. Lamont had so much potential and was so artistic. He was a natural leader. I remember one conversation we had as we walked the lap, sounding something like this. Me saying, "Lamont, you are amazing. You read so well and your drawings are so detailed and colorful. Everyone in our class looks up to you and wants to be your friend. Why did you shut down during writing time today? This is your jam. This is your place to shine and be incredible." Lamont said something like, he was messing with me. And I said, "Lamont, who's messing with you? And what do you mean?" The conversation led to another student looking at him, made him feel insecure about what he was doing, so he quit. So we agreed by the end of the lap that we weren't going to let others stop us from being our best, but that if he started to feel that way again, he could take his notebook and go sit at one of our back tables or on the floor away from the student, and I would understand what he was doing, and we would just move on like normal. He ran off to the basketball court, and I knew the next time that something similar happened, we had a solution that might work. This is my teaching style or pedagogy or strategy. It has a lot of payoff. My students know that I am there to support and love them. This means that when I push them a little bit academically, they are more often willing to take the challenge. When I ask them to take an assessment and I say, "Do your best," they are willing to do this because they know I am there for them and expect them to be the best they can be. They show growth in all areas, behaviorally, socially, academically, because the scaffolds are there and they know when they make a mistake or they mess up, they aren't getting yelled at or given up on. I want all students to feel safe at school and know in Ms. Robinson's classroom, they can count on feeling safe and supported.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bolek, and I teach 7th grade world history. History is often taught as if it's just a list of facts that occurred in a vacuum, as if there are no perpetuators of this history. And what I like to do is take that historical fact and relate it to the student. And this actually is my foundation. So it allows students ownership of their learning when they see that the foundation of our lesson is their perspective and their understanding of history. I also use their experiences to drive my lessons. So the student experience, again, is the foundation of learning. Hearing what the community needs, that's where I teach history from. So we're turning an acontextual historical fact for the individual student into something that is much more digestible and relates to them. So, like I said, history did not occur in a vacuum. It was perpetuated by people, and the right thing to do is to teach how students are related to this historical event, related to these people, and what it means for them today. So students have a lot to bring to the table that I think sometimes is ignored or forgotten. As a history teacher, I'm not here to just stand and tell them all the fact and have them memorize these facts and then repeat them back to me. They have a lot of experience. They have their own cultures, their own beliefs, and their own experiences to bring to the table. And I like to approach my lessons from their experience and their perspective at the forefront. So if I'm teaching about Rome and Roman law, what does that have to do with a student sitting in my classroom in 2020? How do these laws relate to that student? How did those laws perpetuate to actually still exist in the United States today? So we're recentering the historical approach to instead put the voices of the student the marginalized groups that exist at the forefront instead of that dominant narrative of history that we often hear. We often hear a traditional approach of Rome being that it was so great, it was so strong, and they call the outsiders barbarians. But instead, we should redefine that. Barbarians is a racial prejudicial term. It's not a good thing to call the outsiders. And if they were so uncivilized and so bad, how were they able to defeat the all-powerful Romans? Students need to be able to question authority, and that authority starts right here in the classroom with the teacher. They need to question what is being presented to them. What does this have to do with me? Is this the truth? Why are you perpetuating history in this sense? So the key to learning and critical thought is the active questioning of the dominant narrative in history and what they're often told. That can be cultivated in the classroom first and foremost by the teacher, by having students question what you say and what you're presenting to them. I had a student today ask me, if Rome was so great, why is it ruined? Why did it fall? We always talk about Rome, the rise and fall. Well, if they were so great and we build our buildings after them, didn't they eventually fail? Should we really see them in this powerful light? Again, I'd like to say that the lived experiences of my students are the focal point of the lessons I develop. These lessons focus on social justice. So if we're looking at the laws of Rome and we're looking at the laws of the United States, we want to know what are the purpose of these laws and in what ways do they promote equity or do they actually cause inequality? And then what do we do to fix that? What can we do to promote social justice in our current state, in our current country, in our current community?
The missing link, poetry and the rhythm of change. In her poem, Why People Be Mad at Me Sometimes, Lucille Clifton wrote, "They ask me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories, and I keep on remembering mine." My name is Tara Elliott. I'm an 8th grade teacher from Bennett Middle School. This is my 22nd year teaching reading and language arts in the middle school. I'm also a published poet, but I wasn't always a good student. In fact, I earned a D in 9th grade English class because the class was primarily focused on non-integrated grammar instruction. I remember we had a Warner textbook with pages and pages on grammar and worksheets for practicing over and over and over. There was no joy in any of the activities, and you were either right or you were wrong. In my case, I was wrong all the time. Grammar scared me. The words direct object sent a bolt of fear straight up my spine. That white cover of the textbook is still vivid in my mind over 30 years after I took that class. My teacher also loved diagramming sentences. I'm not sure if you even know what that is because we don't really do it too much anymore. What my teacher didn't do is engage her students. Nothing was integrated. Every part of that English class was separated. Grammar instruction, writing instruction, reading instruction. It really wasn't her fault though. In the 1980s, teaching it all separate was what teachers did, and kids had to figure out how it worked together. I never really did figure out how it worked together in that teacher's class. But the one thing she did do was stay after school with me to work on grammar. And after we finished with grammar, she read my poetry. Even at 16, I would scribble lines, and now as I look back, they were terrible, horrible lines about what it was like growing up during the Reagan era, when we just knew we were going to be taken out by a nuclear bomb. To pass the class, she gave me extra credit for writing poetry. This is what I took away that year. Art can save us, all of us. Fast forward to college, I was fortunate enough to pick up a job when I was a junior at St. Mary's College of Maryland. I became Lucille Clifton's driver. Living in cities all of her life, she never learned how to drive. So my job was to pick her up from home and drive her to campus, take her out to do some light shopping or maybe stop by a restaurant, and then drive her home. This job became a life-changing experience for me. She was the most amazing teacher I ever had. From Lucille, I learned how poets think, and it wasn't all separated out like that 9th grade English class. Lucille would get into the car and ask me questions like, Tara, how does a microwave oven work? I'd tell her, I don't know. And she'd always respond with, I don't know why I thought you'd know that, probably because you're so smart. I'd drop her off at home and then head to the school library and ask the research department to help me find the answers to her questions. And I'd write them down on a note card, which I'd hand to her the next day. She'd always take that note and she'd read it and she'd go, oh, wow, thank you so much, Tara. And then she'd slip that note into her handbag, which she always kept on the floor. And then she'd turn to me and she'd ask me, Tara, why is the color green called the color green? And I'd tell her I don't know. But then I knew I had my next assignment. And I would be absolutely floored to discover my research notes appearing in some of her poems, even years later. I'm white. I grew up privileged in more ways than just my skin color. Through Lucille, I was introduced to so many poets of all races from all different backgrounds. Lee Young Lee, Carolyn Forche, Gwendolyn Brooks, Amiri Baraka, otherwise known as Leroy Jones, Allen Ginsberg, Sharon Olds, Bill Stafford, all brought in to read to St. Mary's College. I thought that this was pretty normal, and not knowing what I know now, I really didn't appreciate it as much as I would today. And because I loved spending time with Lucille, I took her class. And I didn't understand why she was so angry at Disney in talking to our class about Pocahontas. But she'd always take the time to explain. And then she'd cement what she was teaching us in poems, like the poem Matoka, in which she took on the persona of what the white people have always called Pocahontas in order to deliver her message. Potaka, the actual name of Pocahontas. In the dream was white men walking up from the river. In the dream was our land stolen away from horses and our names. In the dream was my father fighting to save us. In the dream, the pipe was broken and I was leaning my body across the whimpering white man. If our father loves revenge more than he loves his children, spoke the dream, we need to know it now. In 7th grade, I had a teacher who introduced me to poetry. We read Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's The Ride of Paul Revere. We had to memorize passages and then present them to the class. This caused tremendous anxiety. When I was a sophomore in high school, we read Keats, Yeats, Shelley out loud in class and then analyzed the poems. I was told I was wrong again and again by the teacher. The poem means this, the teachers would exclaim. When I was in Introduction to Literature class in college, we read the same poems again, and then we analyzed the poems. I was told I was wrong again and again. This poem means this, the professors would exclaim. And then when I was in upper level classes with really great teachers like Michael Glazier and Lucille Clifton, I read Elliott and H.D. and Pound. I read Maya Angelou and Toy Derricott and I read Elizabeth Alexander and Derek Walcott and Seamus Heaney. I read Adrienne Rich and Joy Harjo and Jane Kenyon. And I was never told this poem means this. I was asked what I thought and then asked why I thought what I did. When we question children using the arts as background, the scaffolding is already there. The link to guide children into wanting to find out more is there. The discussion you so hope to build as a classroom teacher is there. The arts move us. They connect us as human beings to something greater than ourselves. They allow cultures to slip into our classrooms without very much effort on our behalf. They build understanding. They change us for the better because we can understand each other's memories from their perspectives. I always start the year in teaching Lucille's poem, Blessing the Boats. Blessing the boats at St. Mary's. May the tide that is entering even now, the lip of our understanding, carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain that it will love your back. May you open your eyes to water, water waving forever, and may you, in your innocence, sail through this to that. I teach this poem with my kids the very first week of school, and I ask them what they think Lucille was talking about and why. Then I tell them the same story that I just told you about driving Lucille Clifton, and that I spoke to Lucille Clifton on the phone when she was drafting this poem. St. Mary's College had asked her to write a poem for the millennium about St. Mary's College. It was commissioned, and she was very nervous. She told me she was concerned about writing this poem because St. Mary's was a known slave boat landing. When my students read this poem with this new information, they understand how Lucille layered this poem. They understand the history Lucille managed to slip in without anyone knowing. Several of my students each year point out the line, "Open your eyes," because their own eyes have been opened to understanding the context from which she was writing. Let us as teachers learn to teach in the layers and the scaffolding that Lucille Clifton used to teach her students. Let us learn to foster that why in our students. Let us learn to teach them to question everything they thought they knew and use poetry and the arts as a tool of evocation and what students need the most, empathy for their fellow human beings.